not a great time to start a presentation, just standing between you and the lunch. I will try and keep it not more than 30 minutes for sure, but I'll try and make it more informative for you. I think this is, how many of you are new to Teamcenter? How many of you are familiar? Saw two great presentations from you, sir, excellent. For people in the side and back, how many of you have heard Teamcenter? Can you raise the hands? Not bad. So this particular session, what I'm going to introduce to you is more on the PDM and a little bit on the PLM. Why it is important is, I think our guys talked a lot about digital twin of the product side. We hear a lot of buzzwords in the industry today, right? Digital enterprise, digitalization, smart manufacturing, industry 4.0, all these jargons, right? End of the day, if you look at, right, the foundation for all this has to be something like a backbone or a foundation of an enterprise application like a PLM forms the foundation for whatever you got to do outside of the product side. You have a ERP, MES system, supplier collaboration, so many lot of other things comes in, right? But very important is to set a foundation to manage your own products that you design, right? That's a very important thing for whatever you are aspiring for in terms of industry 4.0 or whatever it is, right? So today I'm going to introduce to you something called Teamcenter Rapid Start, which is more like a pre-configured packaged version of whatever a small and medium business needs, right? It's like a plug and play. You just want to get started. You're done with your CAD, CAM, and CAE. Now the next step you want to take, you don't know where to start, right? We come up with something like a pre-configured packaged version of a boxed PDM under the brand name called Rapid Start. So let me just quickly go through. Irrespective of the product that you see in the market today, right? Right from a smartwatch all the way to an aircraft. Could be a very simple product all the way to the most complex product, right? Some of what you see here, it's all required, irrespective of the complexity. The need for being smart, need for being customized, personalized, need for being connected, need for being efficient, all this, right? Cost effective, quality, all these are very common. So it's important that we start looking at how we can set up a foundation which can address some of these challenges for the complexity of these products that we are talking about. It could be any products that you make. I would just like to start with this intro slide. The reality for many manufacturers today, again, going back to irrespective of whichever industry you belong to, whatever you see, you can very well relate to. Most of the time, we are talking about, in a design world, it's all about managing your CAD CAMs and optimize the design with integrated simulation tools. You're pretty much clear about how the product is going to perform. Most of us, at least here, are new to how you start handshaking with other systems, right? Here you talk about a CAD BOM or an engineering bill of material, for example. Then you have to work with the manufacturing engineering team to start building manufacturing bill of material or a bill of process. And there should be a seamless handover of information from design to manufacturing. Right? It's very important. That forms the foundation for you always send the right design information to the manufacturing. And then you start automating the manufacturing operations, how you take this operations to the shop floor. You start looking at MES systems, which can take some of these operations, put it to the machine, execute the operations, capture the genealogy, like different things that needs to be captured for tracking purpose, so that you have the complete track of what's being done, which lot number the plot has produced, all that kind of information. It doesn't stop there. You also go to service. Some parts, like if you look at an power plant or ship or let's say an aircraft, the service bill of material, service lifecycle management we call it as, that's also equally important. So what I'm trying to get in is, these are predominantly a silo kind of setup. Most of these are silos in most of the even advanced customers. What we are saying is, if you have to start looking at a PLM foundation or a roadmap to digitalization, you have to start looking at addressing these gaps, provide a bridge a seamless handover of information from all of this. And it doesn't stop there. How do we improve the quality of the product? We capture the knowledge back from the service or an operational world in the form of a change or whatever it is, connecting back to the PLM system so that you continuously keep the learnings passed back to PLM system. So you can improve, whatever you are talking about in the digital twin of the product, whatever you have to perform, there should be some inputs coming. So it should be a closed loop setup. You can call it as a closed loop quality or closed loop manufacturing. I spent some time actually to explain this because it's very important. It's more like an education for you to start looking at all these building blocks to set a solid foundation for your enterprise journey. Okay, now let's just go to the reality. That's all complex things. Now where do I start, right? You need to start somewhere. It may be a little overwhelming, but there are people like Unbox have done a tremendous job in terms of putting some of these pieces together, right? So where do you start? Where you will go next? How fast you can get there? How much it's going to cost? It's all going to be very different for different customers. You cannot generalize this thing. Some person can start with only a CAD CAM, enough for him. But some person actually looking at the aspiration of growth targets that he has and the acquisition he's making, he has to scale up pretty fast to beat, catch up with the competition, right? So these are the questions that people have to start asking, themselves and start answering. So if you look at some of the survey results from Aberdeen, saying that from a just purely CAD standpoint, right, CAD data management standpoint, predominantly, majority of them, you can see the results shows by itself, right? Majority of them still are going back to this classical old file-based, centralized server kind of setup. No proper revision control, always wrong design goes to shop floor, and all sort of issues happens, right? Still, I mean, while people talking about PDM, PLM, a lot of people are still in that kind of situation only. Very few, about only 33% really, or like the likes of the case studies that we have seen, they fall in this category. Right? So what is the difference that, I'm not even talking about a PLM, right? Just for a pure PDM, what kind of difference is making? Reuse of existing data goes up, development time comes down, you eliminate the non-value-added tasks for the most part, right? And when it comes to reuse, right, but if you look at a lot of 3D reuse, most of you know master model concept, right? You get the design right, and Anand talked about feature-based machining, etc. You get the fundamental design part addressed very well. Enter downstream, be it manufacturing or supplier or a cost management, everybody can reuse that. So that's reuse. Push for reuse means that your, I think, design intent has to be right. Get things right at the first time and push for reuse. That's how you improve the productivity of the organization as a whole. Right? So from a rapid start, right, let's just forget about all the complex thing. Where do I start? Just start with these three simple things. Single source of truth of your product information. Just get that right. Fix the foundation, right? Number two, can you automate the processes? An NPD process or an APQP process, or let's say design release process, right? Some of the processes has to be automated with putting through the right resources who actually review and push the workflows, everything paperless. Again, we'll take the example of Unbox, right? Phenomenal job in terms of even the other, both of you have done a great job here, bringing both MCAD and ECAD together. Pushing for, interoperability, making sure that interference checks between, layouts and the enclosures are done properly. Very important, right? So these are the things that you can think of, right? If I had to summarize the four important things that you can start looking at from a basic data management standpoint, manage the designs, ECAD, MCAD. Number two, manage documentations. I'll talk about the kind of documentation that you encounter. Just hold on for a while. Number three, processes, right? All different workflows can be automated. Number four, pre-configured groups, rules, disciplines. In an organization, you have to make sure that who gets to do what kind of information has to be protected between different groups. There should be some kind of discipline in the organization, right? That's the fourth box. If you just start addressing these four things, it's a massive step forward. We can always, move to the next levels, right? So from a data management, right? If I had to just go back to the fundamentals, what do we really mean by data management? You got a lot of simulation, CAD you've seen, right? What we are talking about is every single part. We call this as an item, right? You got a name and some information. The amount of information that kind of blows up over a period of time, you can imagine. The change information, material information, vendor information, geometry, modeling, software, electronics data, wire harness data, I mean, requirements, manufacturing processes, so much of information. If a small change happens to the part, imagine the amount of interlinking it has, the where used and where referenced kind of information. So that is the kind of information overload that we are talking about. Just take a look at quickly. Some of you have seen Teamcenter. This is how the Teamcenter interface looks like. Looking for information, right? Once we have the information organized, quickly look for that information, and information comes. As a result, you start filtering, narrow down your search, look for parts of one particular category. You got a list of parts. Quickly just pick and let's do a comparison of what part that you're really looking for. For example, just pick one particular part. Let's say a part how it is managed in a PLM system, for example, right? This is how you see you got plenty of information tabs there. You start with just basic understanding of this part information. Then you got, let's say, some attachments in terms of documentation or any of the additional information you see here. In the history, you see all that track record of where the information is flowing from. The network of information in the form of all the different relations this particular part has got. You can see which assembly, which parent assembly it belongs to, and what revision of all this information from one single page you should be able to navigate back and forth. And then you go to the parent assembly of this particular part that you have selected, which is this assembly, and then you look for the BOM information, which is more like an engineering bill of material. You look at the history of this selected part. It has undergone two changes, revision A and revision B. Now you want to do some comparison between these two bill of materials, right? What has undergone a change? What is the delta difference? In revision B, you got these two parts. Now you can just start nailing down exactly to that particular additional incremental change that had happened. And probably you can just do what has undergone a change, and if you really want to push it through a workflow for the revised part, you put all annotations, etc., right? And this is a very important thing. This is a lightweight called JT, most of you know. Without the need for a CAD tool, irrespective of any of our competitor tool, if you can just convert the solid model into a JT format, for a manager, he just needs this information. He doesn't need to open a CAD tool. It's very, very highly lightweight. Ultra precise, lightweight, about 1/100th of the weight of the part file, for example. You can just push it in a mobile or a tablet. You can just cut the section, and you can do all sort of analysis, etc., right? And coming to, let's say, workflow, now this guy is done. His part information, his drawings are ready. He put some annotations that in the revision B, certain thing has to undergo a change. Can you just make some change, right? You just push all this back into change, right? You got a change, right? I think I saw that. That's good, right? So change management is a very important discipline that an organization has to follow. Everything has to be organized through a proper change request and change notice and have all the information captured, right? That's a quick example of, let's say, basic introduction to how a PLM system will look like, right? Some basic information search and things like that. Next important thing is once we have the basic data managed, now we are talking about need for having an ECAD, MCAD, and wire harness, and also equally important the software. There are 4 components. In a mechatronics world, there are 4 important things, right? Mechanical, electrical, electronics, and software. You take a mobile phone. The enclosure outside thing is done in a CAD, solid modeling tool, mechanical CAD. Inside there is a board. There is a PCB board which starts with a bare board, and then you have to start placing all the chips, etc. Typically, you need a PCB schematic tool, design tool, and also a PCB advanced design tool like DFM, etc., that kind of tools. Then, if it is like say an aircraft, imagine the number of wires that goes around, right? Complex products like aircraft from cockpit to, let's say, fuselage, everywhere there's a wire running around. Wire harness, it's an important thing. And in a chip, something has to get flashed, in the form of a software, right? That software undergoes a life cycle on its own. We call this as an application life cycle management, right? Like Polarian, for example. So these 4 things has to be properly done. A part or a small circuit, you just go to a car, you see a nice, fancy, almost like a cockpit view, but so that amount of information that goes behind the scenes, some of these tools are being used. And the interrelation between each of this is very important. Any one particular discipline undergoes a change, all the impacted systems have to be in sync to make sure that they accept the change, ensure that there is no discrepancy. So quickly, this is a solid edge. Again, most of you are familiar. Purely from a CAD standpoint, what we are showing here exactly works with all our competitor CAD tools also. You see a menu called Teamcenter next to that view, next. From there, you should be able to reuse any information, check in, check out. Anything that a CAD designer needs can be done with this user interface. It does not need to get out of this. Everything is possible only in this UI. So in this particular case, I think there is actually a reuse that this is the design, and the designer wants to reuse probably a fan in this case. Just instead of recreating a part, again he is looking for if there is a possibility to reuse an existing part. And without going out, he is just looking for part of that specification if it is available in a PLM system. Just quickly run a search within the same interface, look for possible match for this fan, and one particular fan possibly matches this criteria. Just looks at the graphics and see if this is all okay to reuse. And from this interface, he's just actually pushing it to the CAD. And a part is from a PLM system getting reused in a CAD environment. And the more that people do this, they can increase the number of standard parts and reduce the number of design parts, which is a very important thing when it comes to commonization and reuse in an organization. Every new part number is a cost to the organization. So the more and more they classify the standard parts and push for more reuse across different platforms or projects, that's going to be an organizational benefit in the long run. Cost reduction, right? Yeah, I think it's talking about, let's say if this entire thing, documentation is managed, without getting out, you can just look at everything that is required to be analyzed within the solid edge user interface. So this is an important thing as far as CAD integration is concerned. And of course, we are like leaders in the JT world, right? So from a multi-CAD standpoint, we are extremely strong. Teamcenter is like de facto. Like all big players, uses Teamcenter. Just move on. We talked about the CAD system. Very similarly, ECAD. The PATS is from us, Expedition is from us, which is a Mentor's product. But equally, same for all other competitor CAD also. If you have to do a reuse of, let's say, electronics PCB board, PCB assembly, for example, which comprises of capacitors and resistors, etc., look for a possible reuse in this case, right? Again, same thing. Within PATS, you just go to Teamcenter UI, Teamcenter, and look for the handrail, and see if the handrail you again shortlist based on PCB data set. So you nail down on a particular PCB assembly that can be pulled inside this session. And you open and look at the BOM. If you look at the content, you see that the bunch of capacitors and resistors. Each capacitor, it's an item, right? You go to that capacitor in the chip, you got everything managed. And maybe a software that should go on this PCB board also is managed as a binary. And that binary has to be revision controlled so that it gets flashed. In Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, it's essentially this. It gets OTA updates, right? This is exactly what they do. Just move on. So I think the key message here is the Teamcenter at the end, the last menu, that's exactly the same for all. That is the level of integration we are talking about. Like same check-in, check-out, everything is possible. I promised that we will come back and discuss about the documentation. Documentation goes through its own life cycle. In a product development process, we always start with the requirements. Requirements drives the design in most cases. So requirements has to be managed properly. That's one type of document. Then you got the design models, etc. Once the model is done, then you probably have to do some PMI authoring, right? it's a very important thing to start looking at 3D PMI. I mean, Rahul talked about, MBDs and things like that. Again, you actually can, overdoing PMI is a cost to the company, underdoing is also risky. How do we optimize this? Algorithms can take advantage of, putting the upper limit and lower limit to PMIs. That's kind of documentation that you need to generate. Then is pass on this information to manufacturing, right? If it, again, it's a make buy, right? If it is make, you start looking at CAM programs, etc. If it is a buy, you push it to procurement. Procurement needs that information in a 3D PMI format. It's again a best practice to put all the 3D PMI information in a JT file, and you can just send it across. Then, again, then comes this first article inspection and PPAP and all that kind of thing. Quality inspection, planning, reports you need to manage. Production, service manuals, manufacturing operations have to be managed. Service manuals have to be managed. Technical data publication that Rahul talked about has to be managed. So documentation is not a simple word documentation. Documentation goes through a life cycle. Every assembly or a product has to have all this information properly managed so that information, when it moves from one discipline to another discipline, you always send the right information. That's the key thing here. So document management is not like a simple, Word or Excel. You're talking about just a Word document, simple, very, very similar look and feel, right? Teamcenter menus embedded in Word document, again, do exactly the same thing, just don't get out. Everything is all very tightly integrated. Look for reuse of, document templates and finish your manuals, etc. Okay. We talked about change, right? Change management is important. Again, it's the repetition, I'll just not repeat. A lot of good information is all interrelated. So it's important to keep in mind that any change has to be properly analyzed. And if you look at a particular change, a change has got something called impacted items, right? A part undergoing a change has got impact on requirements, let's say CAE data, manufacturing processes, we talked about all that, right? This container kind of looks at, you make sure that you don't get out of sync. Next important thing is we talked about for a SMB, most of you might not even have a big organization, but something to start with, at least a basic role like engineering author, engineering manager, manufacturing author, manufacturing manager, a shop floor consumer. Just a very basic discipline if you start with, at least that kind of, drives some kind of organizational, let's say, professionalism or discipline in terms of making sure that people do the right things. And you can track on who did what, right? Some kind of, this is again coming as a pre-configured. In the rapid start, some of this are pre-configured. You don't need to start creating this org structure. This is coming for you to get started. So I'm just kind of summarizing. This rapid start is pretty fast, flexible, future, scalable. We start with something basic, then we grow to a big PLM system, and how we do that, I'll just quickly show. See, once you are done with this PDM, right, now we start talking about PLM. So who else in the organization we should include? Now, for large part, we are talking about design. Now, your supplier comes in, your manufacturing, your service guy, your cost guy, your procurement, all these guys really have to brought in, right? Your requirements, your shop floor planning, your shop floor resources have to be synced. So all this actually opens up for a bigger subject, which is PLM. But you need to get the PDM right, then you can bring other disciplines. So the benefits of PDM, we talked quite a bit about reuse, time to market, quality improvement, etc. But once you start looking at PLM, it really transforms the conversation to a different level. You're talking about increasing the company revenue, decreasing the product cost, development cost, etc. The moment you start bringing in other disciplines, like you would really make an impact on the cost, target cost, right? Tool cost. A supplier, bring the supplier very early in the process, shift left, right? Don't wait for the supplier interaction, but you start developing that, you get the supplier involved, get the quotes, make sure that you cut the lead time. So all this, for different topics, all this will translate into savings. You get the design for manufacturing, design for cost, design for sustainability. In the design, you make sure that all different 360 angle for different perspective is taken care of. and it's a knowledge base. It keeps growing over a period of time. Nobody gets everything right in the first time, at the beginning. It's a knowledge base that has to grow, and over a period of time, this is the kind of savings that we are talking about when you have a matured PLM system, right? So it's multicad, single source, all these basic things in the rapid start will help you for that excellence. I just want to, this is the last slide. Trust me, this is the last slide. I will not speak anymore. I just want to basically summarize with this one single ring, which is a takeaway for you. Because you've been listening since morning. I know 50, 60% would have gone in the mind. Let's say discount 40% is fine. But one single thing that if you want me to really highlight again, one more time, this accelerator branding. Accelerator is not a product, it's a branding. Under this accelerator umbrella, we are talking about several disciplines. There are tools, solutions available. Some of this we stand, but large part you have not exposed today. But what we are saying is, once you have the foundation right, then you can aspire for something like comprehensive digital twin, which is a digital twin of the product, digital twin of the production, and digital twin of the performance. The other two parts are big topics which needs 2 or 3 days. But I just wanted to give you that, I would say, let's say now, an awareness that everybody started, post-COVID you can see, the need for digitalization, right? People are not going to office. Imagine a PLM system in a cloud, in AWS environment, completely hosted, means that people can just work from anywhere, right? So that is the kind of situation, and we have to be adapting to this, which will make sure that you will all set for your long-term journey, right? So with that, I am just closing. Maybe I kind of rushed a bit, I think. It's about 20, 25 minutes I took. I think just want to, this is for some of you, it's not, it's good to have at this moment. Some of you, it's an awareness. But I hope you got the message, right? You need to, learn more about this, and you as an ambassador, or you are like in a gateway, for us, that you can take in this kind of message to your organization, so that for the next strategic roadmap of where your IT is heading, IT planning, you can play an influential role. You can just give that feedback that these are the things that it's important. It could be a 3 to 5 to 7 year roadmap, but at least that some of you should start knowing all this and where your competition is heading to stay ahead of the game. Yeah. With that, I'll just close this.